everybody. Welcome to We're Engaged, the podcast that features Purdue University College of Veterinary Medicine's community partnerships. I'm your host, Sandy San Miguel, the Associate Dean for Engagement. If you're new to the show, thanks for joining. And if you're a regular, welcome back. We're really excited to share with you all of the wonderful partnerships that Purdue Veterinary Medicine has. And today we have an awesome one, our partnership with the Chris Center. And I have wonderful special guests on the podcast, and I'm going to ask them to share their role and their organization, please.
Sure, I can start us off. So my name is Dr. Leanne Nieforth. I'm an assistant professor of human-animal interaction here at the College of Veterinary Medicine in the Center for the Human-Animal Bond. And my research focuses on how humans and animals interact and the benefits that we receive on both ends of the leash, per se, in our interaction.
Sandy Moreira. I am the executive director at the Chris Center. We are an organization dedicated to youth mental wellness, connecting kids to nature and experiences with human-animal interaction.
I absolutely love it. I've been looking at your website, and I'm so excited to be able to feature this partnership. So, can you both start by telling us a little bit about the project that you're working on together? What's the mission? Why is this so important?
Sure. So I can talk about our projects. We actually have two projects together. The first focused on two separate populations of sorts. So the first project is focused on the Chris Center's therapy dog program. So we work together in two capacities for this program. The first was to create a mental wellness toolkit. So essentially an education tool that we can use to help educate therapy dog handlers as they interact with all types of individuals within the community. So as Sandy mentioned, kind of the Chris Center's mission is to have that mental wellness piece, but they are not therapists. So they are community members with trained therapy dogs. So with that, we have to be careful to walk a line, but also want to be purposeful in our interactions to promote wellness. So we created together a mental wellness toolkit where we sort of decided kind of important topics to promote throughout these interactions and then worked on a webinar to train their practitioners. And we're currently doing a research project on that program, looking at how the handlers perceived this new curriculum and training and what was good about it and what is missing for future development. And then the second project is actually related to grant, the Marion County Commission on Youth Innovation. So we are working together to identify how therapy dog organizations can best integrate into school systems. So how can we educate teachers and administrators about therapy dogs and vice versa? So how can they educate the therapy dog handlers so that these interactions can be less transactional and less, you pet a dog, you're done once a month or whatever that looks like, and more transformational to benefit both students and staff and administrators associated with the schools.
Excellent.
I'd love to add just a little bit of context around all that wonderful stuff that Dr. Nieforth just shared. If I could back up just a little bit and give a little more of an overview about the Chris Center.
Please.
So I'll start with a little bit about myself too. So I'm a pediatrician by training. I am coming at this from, medical and developmental perspective. And I'm also a parent. So I spent 18 years working in pediatric emergency departments, delivering urgent and emergent care, and saw the mental health crisis just worsening. And I know that the pandemic really shed a light on it. And I know it's not a surprise to everybody that there really is a youth mental health crisis happening. And I'm also a parent of a child for whom animals and nature have really been her lifeline. I have two wonderful kiddos. One of them in particular really taught me the value of animals in her mental wellness and in her journey. And so the Chris Center is only 3 years old. We're a relatively young organization. But all of us that were part of this founding team were really passionate about finding innovative, including non-clinical ways of supporting wellness. And so we looked at how can we best use human-animal connection and nature to improve wellness. And so what's been wonderful about this project is we know that there's a lot of benefits, health and wellness benefits to bonding with animals. But we're trying to take that next step about being really intentional and finding teachable moments in which we can use that human-animal interaction to really start building skills for young people really going upstream. I mean, there's so, like, the mental health crisis is so complicated. It's a really complex issue. And we know we're not like a band-aid to solve all the problems. It's not a magic cure. But we're really trying to be preventative and go upstream and look at how can we empower young people to have more resiliency skills, to learn more coping strategies. And I think it's a really amazing way to do it with animals. It's very non-threatening. And we're able to go into schools and support our schools who have really taken the brunt of the mental health. There's such a lack of resources out there. There's still a significant stigma around mental illness for some individuals. And so the schools are really bearing the brunt, and teachers, educators, administrators are pretty burnt out. So I think what we're doing is really unique and innovative, and we're really lucky to have the support of someone like Dr. Nieforth, who comes with all this expertise and can help us make it happen and make it real. So we're really grateful.
Well, I applaud you both. I'm so impressed with this partnership, and I see the need every day going into the community, into our public schools. So I think it's absolutely wonderful what you're doing.
Thank you.
So can you tell us a little bit about what you've accomplished so far? Have you seen any impacts? I know the partnership is still young, but what's keeping you going? What are you seeing?
Sure. Sandy, do you want to start us off? Yeah.
Absolutely. So what the first project that we've done together that has kind of, had a deliverable and had a completion is the creation of that mental wellness toolkit. And so this summer, we kind of launched this with our handlers. Dr. Nieforth created a webinar for us, and we asked all of our handlers to watch this webinar. And then we also had an in-person workshop where we demonstrated how to use, basically, we came up with 10 wellness concepts that can come up during the student-dog interaction. And as Dr. Nieforth mentioned, it's not clinical, but it is still building blocks of how we can make connections about wellness through the animals. And so we presented this to our handlers. We did a workshop, and we gave them this resource guide. And we also created these, what we call conversation cards, which is like a small little, I don't know how to describe it, almost like a little key ring binder that has little small pocket-sized cards that have each of these wellness concepts with some prompts so that our handlers can have those with them during visits, and remind themselves when there is a teachable moment. And I think Dr. Nieforth and I are realistic about the fact that sometimes it doesn't happen. Sometimes all it is a conversation about a really awesome dog. And there's a lot of joy and there are good things that happen, but sometimes there's openings and there's teachable moments. And so we launched it this summer, and I think that I'm starting to see that our handlers are, first of all, they're more, they have the background, right, to understand themselves, the science behind the mental health benefits of the human-animal interaction. And that alone gives them a completely different perspective. So I think they'll have context when they're walking into these interactions. And then they also have this toolkit. So when the opportunity presents itself, they can maybe make a step and open a conversation about something, for example, like boundaries. That comes up a lot, I think, naturally in the interactions with students. So when dogs have natural preferences about how they want to be touched, where they want to be touched. And that's a really easy way to talk about something like boundaries in a really non-threatening format for students. So I think we have taken that really important first step and saying, we think this is really important. We think there are wellness benefits, and our handlers know this, and now they have some tools. And so it's a work in progress, but I think the fact that we're being intentional about it is a really positive first step.
I absolutely love it. So I'm already excited, taking you to the next level. Do you have plans to scale this?
Hopefully, yes. So right now we're running just a small pilot study of the feasibility of doing a curriculum like this in a therapy dog organization. So once we kind of analyze that pilot data, we have some focus groups as well as some surveys to kind of look at multiple types of data. The goal, I think, would be, yes, to scale it larger and to ensure that kind of the benefits we're seeing can be adapted by others as well, to combat, as Sandy had mentioned, the mental health issues we're seeing, and to help all the people that want to help with their dogs in a therapy dog organization.
So what are you most excited about for the future?
So many things. I very much enjoy working with the Chris Center. And I think one of the best things about our partnership is our willingness to kind of work through things together and to dream, right? So to know what is practical and logistically possible, and to be able to, narrow down aims for a grant or for a specific project, but to also at the same time think about how all of the work we're doing now can pour into something into the future. So I think with that, just the ideas that are possible with the Chris Center, both on their therapy dog program and other programs, kind of working with the local organization is definitely what motivates me. As a researcher, if I stay in my lab and do things all day and never share it or never work with community organizations, then I'm not doing my job. So being able to create these booklets and these cards that people can take into these interactions, serving students in the trenches of sorts is really what I'm excited about.
This is
To build on that a little
excellent.
bit, I would say that it's been such a joy to work with Dr. Nieforth because she brings all this expertise that is just amazing for a small organization like us. But it's also so exciting as a young, really tiny nonprofit to feel like we are contributing somewhat to this body of research about something we care so much about. And so that is a really unique opportunity. So we're very thankful for that. And the other thing that I wanted to mention in terms of like sort of what we're looking forward to is really the systemic impact of the therapy dog program in particular. When we look at how we are trying to serve youth, we're also constantly hearing about the school environment and also family environment. And I think for the Chris Center, when we are thinking to the future, we're thinking about amplifying our impact on young people by also affecting the environments that they're in. And so making those connections for the school environment, for families, it's good for all of the people that are taking care of our children, and ultimately it amplifies our impact with our children. If everybody is kind of amplifying the same message, I think that we can do more good in the world.
That is the perfect segue for me because it's all about multiplying good. So the goals of this podcast are not only to highlight this wonderful work that you're doing, but also to empower others to either join in on your work or to start partnerships on their own or make their own partnerships better. So I have some questions about logistics. So first, how did you meet? How did you connect? And whose idea was it to work together?
I think we connected through a mutual colleague of ours. There is a wonderful individual named Kathleen Ford who has a lot of shared interests, and I think her life mission aligns very much with ours. She is a trained school psychologist, and she also is PATH certified specialist in mental health. So she is, really an expert in the equine assisted intervention world. And I had connected with Kathleen because she happens to be, we're very lucky, she's our program facilitator for a different program that the Chris Center runs, which is an alpaca assisted wellness program. So we partner with a small farm, and we have 4 alpacas that we are lucky enough to partner with, teach sort of emotional learning skills. So Kathleen knew that I was trying really hard to work on program development and evaluation. And I'm a staff of 1 as the only full-time person. So resources are, limited for us. And so we were having a conversation about how difficult it is to, kind of grow structurally and intentionally. And she happened to have known Dr. Nieforth just professionally through networking, and she was kind enough to put us in touch. So I think it was probably a random email generated from me to Dr. Nieforth to give me some of her time. And then I think we were excited to work together after we shared what we were hoping for.
Yes, I was delighted to see the email come through and someone really excited about doing good with a small, newer nonprofit, but being willing to try new things and really make a difference.
Excellent. So engagement is all about combining superpowers, right? We want mutually beneficial programs and projects where we can combine our expertise. So tell our listeners about how you combine your superpowers. What do you each bring to the table, and how do you each benefit?
I can start first because it's easy for me to talk about Leanne's superpowers. She's incredibly accomplished, and she brings that, depth of knowledge about human animal interaction and all of her research knowledge and best practices. She's been able to share a lot of information with me that it would probably take me years to kind of get through. So she brings that really deep level of expertise and passion for the work. So it has been really great to connect with someone who is so accomplished and willing to work with a small nonprofit like us.
Yeah, I think the Chris Center and Sandy's kind of superpowers are the fact that as a small nonprofit, full-time staff member of one, they were really dedicated to the evidence-based and taking an innovative approach, right? So they are really committed to, their mission and to helping the mental health crisis that we find ourselves in, but they do it in a way that they're willing to be innovative and evidence-based and follow, important ethical boundaries, right, of intervening in this capacity. And I think, working together in this capacity, for me, their programs and their collaborations that they have with the schools and other community-based organizations in, central Indiana is huge. And they're really making a difference through those partnerships. So if I could help in that way and, pour into those partnerships from the research side, then that is kind of that mutually beneficial piece of the research really translating into direct practice.
Excellent. So, what makes your relationship successful? You seem to work together incredibly well. So, what are the keys to that success?
Dr. Nieforth being really kind and nice. I think that we communicate really well and we listen to each other really well. And one of the things that I really appreciate is her realism about working with an organization that's small. Is, we talk a lot about different ideas, but she also has that lens of I need to be able to be flexible and adapt this to a small organization and give us something that we can actually implement to practice. And so that has been, I think, part of a very successful partnership.
Yeah, I would agree. I think our communication is excellent. I know that, if I share something that's not going to work or, Sandy has a better idea, I know she'll tell me, right? We have that relationship where we can be completely honest with each other and kind of discuss things through that lens, which is really beneficial. Two, I think, being willing, I send Sandy manuscripts sometimes and I'm like, check this out. This just got published. And many organizations would be like, why is she doing this? But I've learned that, Sandy will read through them and then we can discuss them. And, if she wanted me to summarize it instead, she would tell me, right? And I definitely appreciate that willingness to engage in the research process. And, through the development of the research programs we have right now, the projects, we've worked through the IRB together and some other, very stringent research oriented things. And, her background, of course, aligns really well with the research side, but her willingness to, talk through sample sizes and, understand exactly what needs to happen and when. And, she can't be in the focus groups and that's okay because I got it. There's ways that we work through that. And yeah, just the honesty and the open communication. And obviously the Chris Center and Sandy and all of the handlers too that I've gotten to work with are just amazing humans who really just have the wellness of kids at heart, which is just awesome. And I'm excited to be able to help.
I'm excited. I wish I was part of it now.
You're always welcome to join us.
So I'm going to get down to the details. What's your preferred form of communication and how often do you communicate with each other?
Sure. So I think we communicate most of the time via email, but we also communicate via texting if it's urgent or needed. We hop on Zoom calls as well as phone calls. So we kind of communicate through varying forms of communication. And I think how often depends on kind of what's needed on both sides. So sometimes when we were working through the IRB, for example, we were going back and forth quite often.
So much fun.
Yes, it's necessary, but yes, so much fun.
Yeah.
So in that regard, we were going back and forth quite a few times. And then, in the slower periods, we make sure we schedule our next meetings when we're in our meetings, which is really helpful. But Sandy, do you have anything to add to that?
The only thing that I would add is that Dr. Nieforth has been very willing to come in person too. So she, even at the very beginning when we were kind of sort of still in the imagining phase of what that mental wellness toolkit would look like, she wanted to come and see our therapy dog teams in action. And visited a few different sites with us. And so that was probably the first time we met in person. That kind of kicked things off. And since then, we've gotten to meet in person a few times through the focus groups and some of the research. And so that has been really nice to have all of the different ways of communicating with each other.
Awesome. I have a lightning round up next. Are you ready for the lightning round?
Ready.
I don't think I shared these questions, did I?
Nope.
Oh,
it'll be especially fun then. Okay. Here are the rules. You can just shout out the answer, and whoever shouts loudest goes first. Okay? What is one word to describe your partnership?
Amazing.
Absolutely wonderful. Wait, that's 2 words.
Excellent. What has been the best part of the partnership?
The impact.
Say more.
The impact. Sorry, I'll stop. No, I think, just watching the handlers. So as Cindy mentioned, I went and saw the handlers kind of when we started this conversation, and I talked with them. I wanted to know exactly what was going on in their interactions and how these cards could help them and not be a hindrance. And then I saw them this past week at the schools, and, watching them interact and saying, oh, I brought up this question, or, oh, you're the one from the webinar. Like, this is just sharing their thoughts, just seeing that in a very short period of time, with just a small group of handlers, seeing the impacts there and, watching the dogs with the kids. I think that's the most exciting for me.
For me, I think I would add sort of the possibilities. I think as we've worked together, it has directly changed sort of the direction that the Chris Center is pointing, because I see the possibility. I see how we can be really intentional, how we can teach some skills through the programming that we have. And it has really kind of created a new path for us. And so there's a lot more for us to explore. And I'm hoping that Dr. Nieforth will be that person that will help us keep building this.
That's the perfect segue to the next question. How do you grow each other? Like, how are you going to grow together as you go into the future?
I think that everything that we're doing, I can certainly say, is helping the Chris Center grow. I'm going to give Dr. Nieforth some time to think about her answer. But that one is easy for me to say. Like, we've had so much growth in this last year, and that is really when we started working together. And we're now, into our 3rd year as an organization. So I think we're hitting our stride, and we've learned a lot since the beginning, but there's been so much growth in our programming and the strategy and the way that we want to impact young people. And a lot of that has to do with how we've been able to grow together and learn not only what I think is impactful for young people, but how we can do it well and evidence-based, and how it can be part of like a growing body of research. So I feel like it's very clear how the Chris Center can continue to grow.
I think we're always growing right now. So I think this particular project has been a really fun adventure and somewhat of a challenge from the research perspective, which I think has really encouraged me to grow in terms of how we measure things, specifically things that may be split-second interactions or long interactions, right? So for example, Sandy and, in our initial conversations, we really wanted to know the impact of the dogs on the kids, right? And kind of how we could magnify what those were and see, what was going on. And ultimately, reading through the literature, there's ways to measure therapy dog interactions when you're purposefully having groups interact with the therapy dogs over a 6-week period or over a certain set number of time. But often in those interactions, there's not as much choice for the dog to interact and for the kids to interact. So at the Chris Center, most of their programs, it's completely up to the kid whether they interact with the therapy dog or not, and for how long and in what way. So being able to kind of think about, okay, how do we want to improve this interaction and educate, handlers and schools and parents about the potential interactions and the impacts that they may have, knowing that every interaction looks different depending on the day, depending on the moment, and a million other factors. Imagine recess and 3 dogs and their handlers and kids whizzing by talking about the dogs, right? And, did you enjoy the dog? Well, yeah, the dog's great, right? So we hit that, ceiling effect. And, did that dog have an impact on that kid? Well, in the moment, for sure, right? Because they're, delighted, maybe. But also, how are those effects, continuing out throughout the day. And, how can we really look at this from a rigorous scientific perspective to understand, what's happening in this interaction and how this interaction can be harnessed to help, kids in the mental health, issues that we see today. So that was not lightning. I apologize, but I feel like that has really encouraged my growth yes. And we often look at each other like, okay, we're closer, but there's other ways we're going to get to this.
So what surprised you both about working together? Any surprises?
It was surprising to me that somebody's accomplished as Dr. Nieforth at such a wonderful institution like Purdue would be supported and have the time and the capacity and the interest to work with a small community organization. I think it's an incredible opportunity for us and hopefully for other nonprofits out there. I wouldn't have imagined that it would have been so easy to make a connection with, a Purdue faculty person and say, would you be willing to help us? And the answer be yes. So that was honestly a wonderful surprise.
That's great to hear.
That's awesome. I think on my side, just your willingness to adapt to more evidence-based. So an example of this is recently the literature of human-animal interaction has had a huge focus on terminology. So making sure that we're using the same terms so that we understand kind of across the board of human-animal interactions, what are we doing? Is it therapy? Is it learning? Is it neither, right? What's happening? So we recently, I've sent just as an example, I sent Sandy kind of the few papers that are there, and it's very unclear and kind of a mud puddle right now of what this terminology looks like. But she and the Chris Center as an organization are really excited to kind of be on the forefront of these important terminology changes within the research and have adapted most of their language or will adapt all of their language to follow the research, which I think, as a young organization, that's awesome. Like just to be willing to share, like this is, the evidence base that we currently have. This is the recommendation. And for them to say, okay, let's talk about this further and see how we can, really follow the lead and add to that literature as well.
I love it. Last one. It's time for you to drop wisdom. So what advice do you have for others who would like to engage in community university partnerships?
I would say just go for it. Ask for the help that you think you need to grow, which, as I said, it's a gift for us. And I think the other big part is being really open-minded. And we've talked a lot about how, I think we listen to each other really well. And that's been really part of having an effective partnership. But being really open-minded, it's easy as a younger nonprofit because we have this, we're very mission driven. We have a lot of passion for what we do, but we're not really set in our ways, right? We're trying to get to that sort of end goal of making an impact on young people in whatever way we can, and to have the support of somebody who's so knowledgeable and has the expertise kind of help guide us and stay open-minded about it has been, I think, really helpful for us.
Thank you, Sandy. I think on my end, from the researcher and academic side, listen more than you speak at first, and really understand what the program is doing and recognize that they're experts in their intervention, because in this lens, they're the expert in what they're doing. So if you can understand what that is and join together in that regard, that's the best way to do it.
Valuable words of wisdom from both of you. Thank you. So before we wrap up, if our viewers and listeners want to learn more about your programs, where should they go? How can they find out more about the Chris Center and the Human Animal Bond Center?
So for the Chris Center, you can look at our website, and it is chriscenterpaws.com. So CHRIS Center PAWS.com. And I know we're also on Instagram and Facebook and all of those things, but I can't tell you what those social media handles are because that's not my favorite.
Look them up and put it in the show notes.
Thank you.
And then for my work, the Center for the Human Animal Bond has the website on the Purdue Veterinary Medicine website. And my lab, the Human Animal Partnerships and Interactions, or the HAPPY Lab, will have a website in the next month or so. So stay tuned.
Okay.
But my personal website, leannenieforth.com, is another location where to go.
Excellent. Well, thank you both so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.
It just filled me with happiness, and I'm sure everybody who listens to this, it's a great way to celebrate these partnerships and become inspired. So
Well, thank you.
appreciate you and everything that you're doing.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks so much.
So for our listeners, if you like this episode, please subscribe, rate, and share it with your friends. And remember, together we can change the world. So use your powers for good.